You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the fourth Doctor story, The Creature from the Pit. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today is Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
Folks, we really want to emphasize how important it is for you to take a moment to write an Apple Podcast review or Spotify review, a rating, or wherever you can do a rating or review. That actually really does help grow this the show, and this is one way we get new listeners. So we really do appreciate it when you write a review of this or any of the shows on StarQuest. So thank you. And I want to encourage you to stick around. We have more of your great listener feedback from previous episodes, so we'll have that toward the end of the show. But and also, I want to encourage you to check out another show on the StarQuest network called The Secrets of Middle-earth, which you can find wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/Middle-earth. And now let's get to the topic of our show right now, which is The Creature from the Pit. Jimmy, can you give us a recap of what happens in The Creature from the Pit?
This week, the fourth Doctor, the second Romana, and one of the canines arrives on Chloris, a planet that is covered with vegetation but is very poor in metals. The absence of metals both makes metal extremely valuable and prevents the inhabitants from farming the planet to make food, so they're in a permanent dark age. The Doctor and Romana get caught up in a conflict between the Lady Adrasta, who is in charge of the metal monopoly, and a group of metal bandits. Adrasta has been throwing her enemies into a pit to be eaten by a giant blob-like creature known as the Creature, and the pit it lives in is known as the Pit. The Doctor jumps into the pit and meets an astrologer named Organon that Adrasta threw in, but he has strangely not been eaten by the Creature. It turns out that the creature from the pit doesn't eat people. He principally eats chlorophyll, which the plants that cover the planet are full of. In fact, the creature is an ambassador sent from the metal-rich planet Tithonus. He arrived 15 years ago to arrange a trade deal of chlorophyll for metal. But Adrasta realized that the abundant metal would undermine her monopoly on the substance, and she tricked the ambassador into the pit and started throwing astrologers at him. It takes a while for all this to be revealed because the ambassador can't speak a human language, but he has a translator device that Adrasta also took from him. And once communications are restored, it all comes out. When the truth is uncovered, Adrasta's underlings turn on her, and she is swiftly killed, though it isn't precisely clear how. Unfortunately, the metal bandits now want to take over the metal monopoly for themselves, but a bigger problem emerges because the ambassador was able to send a message back to his people about what happened to him, and they've now sent a neutron star to collide with Chloris's sun, and it's almost there. The Doctor, Romana, and K9 use the TARDIS to tractor beam the neutron star long enough for the ambassador to spin a thin shell of aluminum around it and neutralize its gravity, allowing it to spin harmlessly off into space instead of into the sun. That's not really how science works, but in the end, all is well, and the ambassador leaves the people of Chloris with a draft of a trade agreement, which the astrologer Organon says was written in the stars, which may be literally true since the ambassador is from another planet. The end.
Very good. Your overall impression of this story, Jimmy?
Yeah, I enjoyed this. It has what is regarded as one of the most unfortunate props in Doctor Who history, namely the prop for the creature itself. But there's a lot of fun stuff in this. It moves pretty quickly. It has a nice economic story, that's kind of at the core of it. It has a nice outer space ending. And, episode 4 in particular really moves quickly. Adrasta dies early in episode 4. And then we have the metal bandits, now they want to take over the monopoly. And then we've got, and here comes this neutron star that's about to destroy everything in the solar system, and we've got to deal with that. And so it's well done, and there's a lot of really funny dialogue in this one. You can sense the presence of Douglas Adams as the script editor.
Most definitely. That was the thing that stood out to me, was the very fun bits of repartee that go on in this one. And I agree. I like this one. Apart from the prop of the unfortunate Erato, it was a bit odd, but there was, I was surprised at how early Adrasta dies. That seemed, I was like, well, that wrapped things up pretty early. What are they going to do the rest of the episode? And then they put a couple new layers on it, which was a nice way of making the story more interesting. So I really did like that as well. One interesting,
we should probably mention for folks what the problem is with the Erato ambassador prop. Basically, it's a big blob, but it has a couple of protrusions, and one of the protrusions kind of comes out and forks. It looks kind of, you get the sense he maybe uses that as a hand, but then there's this other protrusion that just comes straight out like a tube. And even though he's green, that doesn't stop it from looking phallic, just like Alpha Centauri in the Third Doctor's time was green but still looked phallic. Alpha Centauri looked kind of circumcised. Erato looks kind of uncircumcised. But this looks like a male member. Yeah. And the Doctor at one point is trying to communicate with Erato, and he blows into it like it's a speaking tube on a ship, and then tries talking into it. But it looks ridiculous. And they realized this when they were filming, but there was no time to change the prop.
Right. Apparently they didn't have it for rehearsal, the prop.
Yeah.
So somebody did it, the night before it was due. It's the worst part of the story. Everything else was actually pretty well done.
Yeah.
I was going to mention, this is Mary Tam's, this is Lalla Ward's first thing that she filmed as Romana, and that the script had been written for Mary Tam, and I guess Lalla Ward wasn't quite happy with her character in this one, especially with, I guess, the costume and the hair as well. So what we saw last time in
City of Death
was more to her liking, but so she's still getting into the character in this one, so you can kind of tell a little bit.
Oh yeah, there's a definite tonal shift in she is acting much more like Mary Tam as Romana. Mary Tam had this very superior, regal approach to things, and Romana in this, even though it's Lalla Ward, she has this very regal, superior, I am a Time Lord thing, and you will obey me. And when the metal miners capture her, she takes charge of the situation. They're debating whether to kill her or not. They think she may be a spy from Lady Adrasta. And Romana tells them, I said, go ahead and kill me. Commit suicide. Listen to that hirsute moron. And Torvin, who is the leader of the metal miners, who she's just called hirsute, says, here, who are you calling hairsuit? You. Do you want to make something of it? No, I just want to know what it means. It means hairy.
That was a very funny exchange. I did write that one down because that was it sets that very quick back and forth repartee that really worked. It was that, and also the Doctor's conversation with the astrologer, the court astrologer.
Yes,
also quite funny. The back and forth. It was very well written, but also acted. Like you have to do those sorts of things really back and forth, and it worked out.
They also, in this scene with Romana and the metal bandits, she makes them all sit down by force of personality. It's like, sit, and she has to tell them a couple times, but they all sit down. So she really takes charge of this. Oh, also, I wanted to mention, we get a scene in the TARDIS at the beginning before they've landed on the planet where Romana has been cleaning out a junk room in the TARDIS, and she's got various items of what she regards as junk. And the Doctor is saying, actually, half of this stuff is not junk to him. But at one point, she pulls out the jawbone of an ass.
Yep.
And she says, all right, but what can you possibly do with an old jawbone of an ass? And the Doctor grabs it from her and says, don't be a Philistine. which is a direct reference to the book of Judges and how Samuel killed like 10,000 Philistines with the jawbone of an ass. And they don't feel the need to name check Solomon. Don't be a Philistine is all we get. And that's a great double entendre of, a Philistine being a person who doesn't appreciate culture.
Right. The audience of the time would still be such that they would get the jawbone of an ass would be something they would remember from Bibles.
Yeah.
He also had some souvenirs from the labyrinth with the Minotaur, including the rope that he apparently lent or got from Theseus as they to use to find their way out of the labyrinth. So that was quite funny. He also references Peter Rabbit. And a couple other children's books, Squirrel Nutkin, Mrs. Tiddlywinkle, Jemima Puddle Duck, all stories I've read to my kids.
By Beatrix Potter, and Romana knows these stories.
Yep, and so does the Doctor, apparently. So the Beatrix Potter is well known on many planets, apparently. So they're pulled off course by a distress signal that once they hook it up, because the Doctor's he's left the distress signal receiver unplugged, essentially, because he doesn't want to hear from the Time Lords, who'd probably been sending a signal to him. So they get pulled off, and they land on the planet in a forbidden zone called the Death Zone, I guess it is. And there's this structure around them, this very large structure, and the Doctor recognizes it as an eggshell.
It's giant, by the way.
Yeah. And so they don't, I guess eventually they come out and say the eggshell is the remains of the Tithonian ambassador's ship that crashed.
They also note that the giant eggshell is partly or wholly metal.
Right, and woven too. I think he says. So
by the way, even before they land, we get a scene on the planet where Adrasta is throwing one of her enemies into the pit. So this is Chekhov's pit. It's got to be used later in the episode. The Doctor's clearly going to go into it. I didn't expect the Doctor to go into it so soon, though, because he just leaps into the pit.
Yes.
In an effort to really, it's a complex plot to save Romana, because if Adrasta thinks the creature has eaten him, then she has to now focus her efforts on keeping Romana alive to learn what she wants to learn from Romana.
Right, because Adrasta wants the secret of the eggshell, what it's made of.
Yeah. Also, one thing I liked about this episode that they never say, but this is a female-dominated society. Adrasta is in charge of, normal society here, and she's got a right-hand woman who takes charge when Adrasta is not around. And so they've established this is a female-dominated society without being preachy about it.
Right.
And I like that. That's great. You have men in subservient roles. Like there's this guy he's called the Huntsman, and he is in charge. He's got a whip, and he's in charge of what are called wolf weeds. And these are basically, they're kind of like tumbleweeds. They move by rolling, but they're more solid than tumbleweeds. And they're like wolves, only they're under the control of the huntsman, and he uses them to hunt stuff, including people. And I really like the wolf weeds. I think they're super cool.
I called them mobile attack cacti.
Basically, yeah. But, he's a male, but he's subservient to Adrasta and her right-hand lady. So they do a nice science fiction thing of here's a culture that's quite different from ours without being overt about it and without preaching about it.
Yeah, the Doctor jumping into the pit, I feel like the Doctor early on suspected that the creature in the pit was more than just a mindless creature.
Oh yeah,
and that's why he was willing to jump. When they approach the pit, the Doctor says, "What's this?" Adrasta says, "We call it the pit." The Doctor says, "Ah, you have such a way with words."
Yeah.
which is a great insult.
There's another nice bit where they're talking, Adrasta brings in a couple of engineers. One of them is named Doran. Yeah. And he gets thrown to the creature, and he dies not because of the creature, but because he breaks his neck. fallen down into the pit. But before all that, Adrasta has realized the Doctor has some knowledge of what that shell thing is. And other people don't even realize it's a shell. It's really a shell fragment. It's not the whole, oblate spheroid of a shell. It's just a part of one. But Doran, who's been studying this for years, has his own theories. And he says to the Doctor, really, Doctor, how do you account for the marks of intense heat on the exterior of the shell? And the Doctor says, someone tried to fry the egg? And Doran says, my lady, this man is being facetious. And the Doctor says, he's quite right.
There's also Adrasta points out how the Doctor it seems to be more right than her own engineers, and he says, well, to be fair, I did have a couple of gadgets which she probably didn't, like a teaspoon and an open mind. Yeah. I want to save that one because that's a good line to bring out.
There's also a great visual joke. Once the Doctor does jump into the pit, he catches onto some roots or ledges or something, so he doesn't fall all the way to the bottom. But now he's got the problem of how do I climb out? And he pulls out of his, once Adrasta is gone, he pulls out of his pocket a book, and the book is Everest in Easy Stages. So he's like going to read a mountain climbing book about how to climb Mount Everest. And then he opens it up and says, it's in Tibetan. And so he then puts that book away and gets out another book called Teach Yourself Tibetan and starts reading it.
That was good. I had a laugh at that one. Yeah.
Which doesn't make a lot of sense with the TARDIS's translation circuits, but
of course.
It's so fun. I'm willing to give him this one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good joke. I do want to point out the guards, Adrasta's guards, they have these very large swords, and I was looking them up, and these are actual, like, either the French flamberge or the German Zweihander. These are big two-hander swords. I saw some commentary online and people talking about these weird, long swords that look so weird and stuff. I'm like, these are actual. These are probably right out of the BBC prop department. This is the size of some of these swords that they had in the Middle Ages.
What I noticed about the guards is they're all wearing hockey masks. Or gladiator masks or whatever. But to me, they look like hockey masks.
It kind of were they metal masks? Because I felt like because Adrasta herself had like metal plates hanging on her, and I was wondering as a sign of her wealth. Right. She could put metal on her soldiers even.
Well, they were painted black, so they didn't shine. They didn't look like metal. I don't know what they were really made of. What I noticed about Adrasta was not just the metal pieces on her costume, but unlike anyone else on this planet, she has this design painted around the edge of her face that it surrounds her face, and it looks elegant. But the thing is, it's silver face paint. So like she's got so much metal, she can put on silver makeup, unlike anyone else on this planet. And I thought that was just another nice visual way of communicating she's in charge of the metal monopoly. She's got metal to waste, so to speak.
And one of the things I liked about Adrasta too is, unlike the bandits who were kind of just bumbling.
Yeah, they were comedy relief.
Yeah, she was fairly astute and on the ball, at least at the beginning. Toward the very end, she started kind of going off a little bit as her scheme was unraveling. But she was astute and friendly to the Doctor at first. Not like overly friendly, but open to him and not immediately,
kill him.
Yeah, not immediately kill him like the others wanted to do. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But the Doctor and Romana both managed to talk their way around both the bandits and Adrasta. They just, in fact, Romana gets the bandits to blow the whistle that calls K9.
I was just going to say that's the way she gets away from the bandit. She pulls out a whistle, and before she can blow it, they're like, "What's that?" Because of course the whistle's made out of metal.
Yep.
And she gets them to blow it. She says it's a whistle. you blow into it. And they try, and it doesn't really work because they're blowing into it the wrong way. And she gets them to repeatedly try to blow the whistle. And it's like, well, there's no noise because it's a dog whistle.
Yeah.
So, try blowing harder. And so they do, and they end up summoning K9.
Who complains from a distance, "I'm coming, lady, I'm coming," like, because he thinks she keeps blowing it. By the way, new voice actor for K9.
Yes, voice is notably different.
Yeah, but it's still good. It's interesting. K9 overwhelmed by the wolf weeds. The wolf weeds attack by piling on whatever they're attacking,
like tumbleweeds.
That's
how they attack.
And they either smother, or in this case, they have a webbing that they wrap K9 in, so he's completely covered in this webbing.
And it jams up his mobility circuit, so he can't really mobility devices, so he can't really move. Right.
So we mentioned how the doctor ended up in the pit, and he meets Organon, the court astrologer, who got thrown in there for having a bad reading. Although what he says is actually what actually happened, which is a man could come from the stars, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, he actually predicted the arrival of the ambassador, but it was regarded as that's ridiculous, and he got thrown to this creature. Right. One could speculate the reason he got thrown to the creature is to cover up the fact that his prediction came true.
Yes.
And Adrasta doesn't want that information getting out, that the creature is really from outer space, because that would raise a lot of questions. I also like how the doctor doesn't challenge astrology in this. It's so nice. You've got this astrologer who is, sincere. He's not a con. He believes in the stars influence things, and you can make predictions. He's really interested in the doctor, and it's like, oh, if I only knew when you were born. What sign were you born under? And the doctor says he was born under the sign of crossed computers, the symbol of the maternity service on Gallifrey.
Literally that sign.
Yeah. And so, the doctor talks to him. They have significant discussions involving astrology, and the doctor never disses it. Right. And I like this because in the Middle Ages, astrology was a respectable craft. And you did have court astrologers who would give advice to people based on what they thought the stars were influencing. And this was a respectable thing, and the doctor treats Organon with respect. The closest he gets to criticizing is at one point fairly late in the story, where it looks like Organon's going to be executed. The doctor says, you might want to give up astrology and find another career. Astrology doesn't really seem to be your forte. But he doesn't challenge astrology itself. He just challenges Organon's knowledge of astrology. And then Organon is the one who, at the end of the story, by looking at his astrological charts, he's just asked, and now that he's been released from the pit, he asks for new astrological charts. He's looking at him and is going, oh no, something's desperately wrong here, because he sees on the charts that the neutron star is headed for the sun. And so you let the astrologer reveal the final problem.
Right. I liked how he introduced himself, by the way, to the doctor. It says, astrologer extraordinary, seer to princes and emperors, the future foretold, the past explained, the present apologized for. That was pretty good. So Adrasta, her plan is, now that she's kind of figured who the doctor is she wants the TARDIS. She wants to use the TARDIS to harvest metal across space and time. So it would be an unlimited supply of metal for her to continue her control, her monopoly. And that's the economics part of this story that you mentioned before, was she has a monopoly on the only metal ore mine on the planet. And the Tythonians were coming because they want to trade metal for chlorophyll. Well, if metal becomes cheap and easy to obtain for what's literally growing on the trees, the money's growing on the trees to trade, she'll lose her power. And so she wants to maintain the monopoly.
Right. This is a monopoly on distribution as well as a monopoly on the metal itself. So she can get metal from other places and but because of her monopoly on distribution, she can only dole it out in small amounts, thus keeping prices artificially high and make a lot of money and have a lot of power. This is kind of like diamonds on our world. Mm-hmm. We've actually got way more diamonds than people realize, but there is a monopoly based in Israel that keeps the supply of them on the commercial market artificially low in order to keep diamond prices artificially high.
I thought De Beers was South African.
No, I think it's. I may have misstated saying it's based in Israel. It is De Beers, but Israel is related to it somehow, but I forget the details.
Well, yeah, Israeli diamond merchants are a key part of that thing. Yeah, and it is interesting. Why was she keeping the ambassador alive in her metal mine? That's something I didn't quite get. Like, I must have missed it. Like, she needed him in there for some reason, but once she had K9 who could kill it and the TARDIS, then she wouldn't need it anymore. Do you know why?
Right, and she says that that the creature is now obsolete once she thinks she can get the TARDIS, so she doesn't need it anymore. She was using it to dispose of her enemies because she thought Erato, the ambassador, was eating them, when really he wasn't eating them. They were being killed by the fall into the pit, and so they didn't come back. But apparently Erato is huge. I mean, he's like hundreds of feet tall, and the mine was the only place she could stick him that would keep him contained, because he couldn't climb out. And so she needed a big space that he can't get out of, and the mine was the only thing. And since the mine is already basically exhausted, it's okay to stick him down there.
Okay. That makes sense. I do like when the bandits, they come up with actually a pretty good idea, which is, Adrasta is going to be going after the Doctor in the pit, so that'll leave the palace unguarded or lightly guarded, so that they can break in and steal all the metal. There's a bit of a funny scene where they're at the palace wall, and there's only one guard at the side gate. Good. What do we do about him? Well, Edu's gone to have a chat with him. What? And then you hear like this gurgling sound. They go, lovely little talker, Edu. Come on. It's just kind of a funny little dark humor moment. But the bandits then, they get inside the palace, and they're running rampant, and then they're like, hey, what's that door over there? That must be the vault. And of course it's the entrance to the pit. So they kind of stupidly run in after them into the pit.
Two of them, including Torvin, the leader, also notice this plaque on the wall that's kind of circular, but it's divided into 5 sections, and it's got a plastic
knob
cylinder in the middle.
Yeah.
And this is Erato's communications device. We don't know that yet, but the Doctor has been talking down in the pit. The Doctor has been talking to Erato about how are we supposed to communicate. And Erato shows him a picture of the communications device, which is actually up in Adrasta's palace. And now that the bandits are up in Adrasta's palace, they notice the communications device. They don't know what it is. They think it's some kind of metal they've never seen, but since it's metal, they're interested in it. And so they take it off the wall, and Torvin and his assistant, it starts glowing, and they both fall under its influence. And without explaining what's happening, they both bring it down into the pit. They put it on Erato, and then they are released from its influence. It's like, what are we doing here? But when the Doctor or anyone else touches the plastic cylinder knob at the center of the device, you hear their voice speaking. So and since Erato does not himself have a vocal track, he uses the Doctor's vocal track. And this is a little hand wavy, because in order to really form speech with your vocal track, you got to move your lips and your mouth and stuff.
Air's going to flow.
Yeah. But it's a nice effect. Suddenly the Doctor is talking for Erato. And later, Romana does the same thing. Even K9 does the same thing. When they're on the TARDIS, K9 extends his antenna up to touch the central knob, and we hear Erato speaking with K9's voice. But the most dramatic moment is when they're getting confirmation of everything that Adrasta did, because we've just heard it all explained in the Doctor's voice. But Adrasta is like, he can grab that knob and say anything he wants, so you can't trust him. And the Doctor's like, oh, well, then why don't you grab it? And she's like, no, I refuse to. And at this point, the huntsman who's there is starting to lose confidence in Adrasta, and he wants to hear in her own voice what she's going to say. So he cracks his whip, and she gets and the Doctor kind of grabs her and brings her hand over to the knob, and then we hear Erato explaining in Adrasta's voice everything that happened. And she yanks her hand off and denies it all and says it's all lies. But now the huntsman knows the truth, and he cracks his whip, and the wolf weeds mob her. Yeah. And at the same time, Erato glides over the wolf weeds who are over Adrasta. And then when he pulls back, the wolf weeds are gone, and Adrasta is now dead. And so that's why I said in the summary, it's not entirely clear how she died. Did the wolf weeds kill her, or did Erato kill her, or was it some of both?
Because Erato was eating the wolf weeds because they're full of chlorophyll.
Yeah, he says, thank you. That was the first meal I've had in 15 years.
Right.
Oh, and the Tythonians apparently live up to 40,000 years. So 15, as they point out, 15 years in a pit is a blink of an eye to them.
The name of Erato is one of the 9 Greek muses. Do you think there's a connection of some sort? Because Erato was the nymph of, or the muse of, like, lyric poetry or that sort of stuff.
Well, maybe they do take names from mythology on Doctor Who, like in Snake Dance in the Fifth Doctor's time. The planet they go to is Devaloka. And in Buddhism, a loka is a location or place. It's a world. And the devas are gods. And so Devaloka is a real place in Buddhist mythology. And it's the place of the gods. So if you die in this life and you get reborn as a god, you're going to be reborn in Devaloka. And so, they took that from Buddhist mythology as a place name, and, they may well be doing the same thing with Erato's name here.
Okay. Yeah. I can't really find any obvious connection, though, like between the name.
A lot of the time it's set dressing. Basically, it's not really meant to have a deeper meaning. It's just we want to allude to something, and this is a cool name or whatever.
There's a couple of numbers that come up in the episode too that are interesting. The Doctor says Time Lords have 90 lives, but he's burned through about 130. Yep. But again, he's being facetious. He's just joking there.
He is, but I think this is another clue that that the Doctor's lifespan was not rigorously set.
Yeah.
In the Fourth Doctor's time. I mean, they'd already introduced the 12 regeneration rule, but this is just more inconsistency on that point.
And then we saw the many faces of the Doctor in
Brain of Morbius.
Brain of Morbius, yeah. We also find out the Doctor's lucky number is 74,384 and 338, which is the odds of success when they are trying to neutralize the neutron star with a thin shell of aluminum. As you mentioned, that's not how physics works.
No, you put a thin shell of aluminum on a neutron star, it's going to convert it into more neutronium. Exactly. All you'll do is make the neutron star a little bit heavier.
Yep. And as we mentioned, Adrasta's death is not the end of the story. The bandits then take over the idea of becoming the owners of monopoly on metal, including Adrasta's former chief counselor, the woman there.
Her name is Madame Corella.
And even Erato is got not really ulterior motive, but also he had a little bit of a hidden agenda. Like he wasn't saying right up front, oh, by the way, we're going to destroy this planet with our neutron star that's on the way. That had to also be revealed. So you had a couple other layers to reveal.
Yeah, this I thought was a bit of a weakness in episode 4 because they're down in the pit. Adrasta's just been killed. Everything looks great. The huntsman congratulates the doctor, and the doctor says, oh, no, don't congratulate me yet. And it turns out that the doctor is now, for no apparent reason, suspicious of Erato. And in fact, he took Erato's photon drive, which is a little hand, or at least a component of it. It's this little handheld thing to use as leverage in case Erato, he somehow senses there's something Erato is not telling him. But they don't do anything to set that up. This comes out of nowhere. They should have, on the dialogue level, set it up that like the doctor asks Erato a question and he doesn't answer or something to give us a basis for this suspicion. But Erato ends up confessing. He says there's this neutron star that's coming because, that shell fragment, it sent off a distress message to my homeworld, and they've sent this neutron star to collide with the sun, which I guess is their standard procedure. And so the doctor then gives him his photon drive back on the condition that he helps them spin this aluminum shell around the star.
Right. Since they have so much metal that they could spare the aluminum to do this task.
Yeah.
Any other notes on this one, Jimmy?
Well, one thing that I think is a flaw in the episode, but it's not unique to this episode, is K9's unreliable power packs, where he's always draining his power packs in order to generate extra dramatic tension, and then he's got to rest and let his power packs regenerate, and it's not really consistent. It serves the need of the current plot, but there's no real logic here. His power packs start fading whenever the plot needs them to.
Right.
And like there is a moment where Erato is saying, okay, if I'm going to have the power, because he's under orders to kill Erato. This is before they know what Erato is. Adrasta is ordered that he kill the creature, and he's like, okay, if I'm going to do that, I need to stop rolling around on the floor now. And so Romana picks him up and carries him, but it's like rolling around on the floor uses a trivial amount of energy compared to the blast that's going to be needed to kill a 200-foot tall blob.
Right.
So, it doesn't really make sense. So I wish there was a little more logic to K9's power management system in the show. But, that's a fairly minor point.
Okay.
One other thing I really liked is, Madame Corella, when she is coming to the bandits to form an alliance with them to take over the monopoly, she, Torvin is not going along with this, and she stabs him and kills him. But as he's dying, he turns around and looks at the knife she stabbed him with, and he says, "Tempered steel. Is that really tempered steel?" And that's the last thing he says. And it's like, that's just such a great line from this metal obsessed guy as he's dying. Right. That's the last thing on his mind is that really tempered steel?
I think she says as she stabs him, something about like, here's 6 inches more of metal. That's also another good line. All right. So that is the creature from the pit. And so we do have that feedback I wanted to share. This is from a couple episodes ago. We talked about the 5th Doctor story, Frontios. Stotts on YouTube writes, "Great video, guys. Stottsy here. I haven't watched this one in decades, so I decided to rewatch it last night before I wrote anything here. Very glad I did, because it wasn't as bad as I remember. It had its absurd moments. The tractators, for example, absolutely laughable, even with the worm backs on them. The whole idea of them bringing down the meteorites was pointless. If they needed humans to drive their excavator, then why try to kill them with orbital strikes? Turlough's temporary breakdown, as needed for the background, seemed to fade a little too quickly. Great acting by all. A tad over the top from Brazen and Plantagenet. Their suspicious nature reminded me of the second Doctor's time. Seemed he and company were being accused of all sorts just because they were there. Only one thing you didn't mention, and that would be the silver-skinned elephant in the Varuna system. Where was Chameleon?
Well, Chameleon was in the TARDIS when it got discombobulated, so presumably he got discombobulated too, and then when the TARDIS got recombobulated, so did Chameleon.
Yes, well, hopefully not very well, and we won't have to see him again.
Oh no, we get to see him again. He comes back, and he is the first companion the Doctor has actually killed, which Peter Davison enjoyed thoroughly.
I can imagine. I'll look forward to that. So thank you, Stotts, for the feedback. So now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Mary G., Bridget C., Anthony C., Michael F., and John M. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Zyman Yannick, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. What did you think of The Creature from the Pit? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send an email to drwho@sqpn.com, or visit the StarQuest Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. You can watch The Secrets of Doctor Who on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia, where you should subscribe, like, and leave a comment. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the first Doctor story, The Ark. Until then, Jimmy Akin, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thanks, Dom, and I'm going to miss Stephen.
Oh, no. And once again...
Well, we'll find out.
Okay. And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, I suppose you could say the yoke's on him if you were the sort of person who said that sort of thing, which fortunately, I'm not.